The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, my name is Jillian Schaefer and I'm the Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Inventory Requirements Planning in Sage 100, presented by Monica Byrne of SWK Technologies. A little housekeeping before we get started. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise down. However, you can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar. To submit a question, look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar. We will answer all questions at the end of the presentation. We are recording this presentation and it will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees as well as to those who registered but were not able to attend. Please take a moment after the presentation to answer our one survey question. With that said, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend our webinar. We're here to help you get the most out of your software solutions and help you find an easier way to run your business by providing you software and industry knowledge, tools, and support whenever you need it. So whether you're here doing research for a new solution or you're just here to learn, we'd like to encourage you to ask any questions throughout the webinar. Lastly, as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels, so we encourage you to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to Monica.
Hi, everybody. This is Monica Byrne. I am a senior consultant here with the Sage 100 product line, and I've been working with the Sage 100 product for over 15 years. I am going to show you today our Inventory Requirements Planning module. So IRP is what it's called for short. You'll hear a lot of people refer to it as that. And IRP, for me, is one of the modules that you can get the most benefit for most easily. So what I mean by that is it's easy to configure, it's easy to set up, it's easy to install, and then you can basically turn it on pretty quickly. So there are some things that you will need to have in place in order to use IRP, and I'll just go over those pretty quickly. You need to know what you want to integrate with. So really the only setup in here, if I go into the inventory requirements planning options, is do I want to integrate with production management, purchase order, and sales order? So you can do any combination of those that you would like. Obviously, you're going to get the best benefit if you can use it in all three modules. But let's say you're not using production management, for instance, you can use it with just purchase order and sales order as well. So with that being said, it's going to look to production management to see if there's any work tickets or work orders that need to be made for existing work tickets or work orders. And then on the purchase order side, it's going to look to that to say, oh yeah, we do have some on purchase order and help in the calculation of your demand. And then of course, sales order is where we will create demand when we enter sales orders for a customer. And this will guide us as to what we have to purchase or what we have to make based on all of these three modules together. The other thing that's key to note is that this works very closely on the purchase order side with your inventory management module as far as primary vendors. So if I open an item, for instance, in this company, as far as your primary vendor, which is located in the center of your screen here, that needs to be defined in order for purchase orders to be cut out of the IRP module. So we can generate them directly out of the IRP module, but we're going to need that primary vendor filled in. You can fill it in, I'll show you on the IRP side, but of course that just takes a lot more time. It's nice to have those already filled in here. It also works with your reorder points. So if you have reorder points established in the system, on our reorder screen here, whether it's economic quantity, max stock level, or reorder point, it's going to take into account any of the information that you have on this screen. Also, on the vendor side, when you have a primary vendor defined, you can define the vendor lead time, and that can also be taken into account if you so choose. So you have the option in production management. So all of that information once should be set up, of course, and then we install inventory requirements planning, turn it on by basically checking the check boxes I showed you earlier for the planning options, and then we can go ahead and use it. So to use it, it's fairly simple. You'll see this module has barely any choices, but you'll go to the main area here and you're going to click Inventory Requirements Planning. And it's going to pull up this menu. And in this menu, we have some choices as to how do we want to plan this, by inventory or by work ticket. I'm going to show you inventory today because it's the most comprehensive, but by work ticket, we'll just break it down by work ticket. Procurement type, so do I want to look at my production, my purchase, or both? So if you had someone who handles production, they could just run it for production. Someone who manages purchasing, they could just run it for purchasing. I'm going to run it for both today to show you both sides of it. And then do we want to include open work tickets for parent items? So if there's open work tickets that we want to include in our planning, then we would have that checkbox checked. I usually always have that checked to plan for everything. This checkbox right here is our lead time checkbox. So if you wanted to look at your lead time for vendors, you'll have that checked. And then your cutoff date. So your cutoff date would be how far into the future do I want to plan my inventory. And in this demo data, I'm going to leave this blank because I wanted to look at everything. We don't have a lot of data in our demo data set. But you would probably put it out there, you know, maybe you're planning through June, so you might put June 30th or something like that. Once you select those options, you can also make some selections below if you want to do it by specific item code, product line, warehouse code, however you'd like to do that, you can go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to say generate. I'm doing it for everything, so I'm just going to say generate. It does come up with this prompt. You haven't entered a cutoff date, so it might take a while. In the demo data, I know that it won't take a while. So I'm going to say yes here. So now it's going to go through the planning phase, and you'll see this screen come up that it's passing inventory items. So it's basically just running through your inventory, looking at open sales orders, looking at open purchase orders, looking at work tickets, and gathering all of that data in one place. So once it's done, you'll notice that at the bottom, our clear button is lit up. So that tells us that something is generated, that it has generated some information for us. And then we have two options, either production or purchase. So in this, with IRP, we look at them separately on separate screens. So I'm going to go into purchase first, and we'll take a look at our purchase screen. So here's what the purchase screen looks like. And you're going to see here as we go through this, there's tons of information on this screen. So I have my item codes down. This by default comes in with all items that you need to purchase. So you'll see here it's recommending purchase quantities. So here's all the purchase quantities that it's recommending. Now we can look at some information here. And we can obviously adjust this purchase quantity if we wanted to. So it's kind of flexible as to how we create these purchase orders when we finally get there. So I can scroll over to the right. So this one's telling me to purchase for 50, the top item. And if I scroll over to the right, I'll start to see why. So I have 0 quantity on hand. I have 50 on purchase order, 50 on sales order. So that means that demand is essentially 0 now. The ones that are coming in on PO are going to go right out on a sales order. I don't need any for work tickets. I don't have any on work tickets right now. So my quantity available right now is essentially 0, of course, based on that PO/SO thing. My economic reorder quantity is 10, but it's not looking at that because this is a reorder point method. So it's going to look at this reorder point quantity of 50. So because my quantity available is 0, it's going to say, oh, you don't have 50 in stock, and you've said you want to have at least 50 in stock. So therefore, it's going to go ahead and recommend that I purchase 50. And you'll see as you scroll down here and look at some others, you know, like this one, for instance, is telling us to make 22. We can go through and see why it tells us to make 22. So this one's 26 on PO and 47 on sales order. So we have a deficit of 21, but yet it told us to make 22. And that's because our reorder point quantity is 1. So I want to fulfill my need of 21, plus I still want to have 1 in stock. So therefore it's recommending I make 22. So I think you're kind of getting the concept. It's going to go through and look at all of this information and make those determinations as to what you need to purchase. Now from here, if everything looks good, you can potentially create all the purchase orders that you need right here and move forward. You can certainly change these purchase order quantities. So if I said, hey, I think I know something's coming up, I'm going to need a few more of these, I can actually change this to 55, or 585, for instance, I can change that right here before I generate those purchase orders so that they generate as I would like them to generate. Now you'll notice I have my primary vendor numbers in most of my items here, but I don't have my primary vendor numbers down here. So if I want to create a purchase order for those from IRP, I have to actually identify a primary vendor in here. So this is where I was saying it's really nice to have it already defined. And of course, it's not going to be taking into account at this point a reorder or your delay time that the vendor might have so that we can put in our lead time. So it's not taking it into account if I do this here. If I put in the lead time on the vendor side in the item, I can certainly then do that, take into account that lead time. So basically, it's just a big spreadsheet with calculations showing you how everything, how it comes to make those calculations of what it would like you to purchase. And of course, obviously, you know things about your business that maybe the system doesn't. So that's why it allows for you to change some things. There's additional things that I can do on this screen, and I can kind of slice and dice the data to see it in different ways before I create purchase orders if I would like. So the first thing is I can put an item on hold. I can say, okay, I'm not going to order these right now. Maybe I'm not going to order these bottom 4 items because I have to look into the primary vendors and why they're not defined. So I could check all of those. That means when I generate purchase orders, it'll generate purchase orders for all of the items here, except for the 4 at the bottom. Additionally, I can go up to the right and I can do some, up to the left, sorry, and do some different things. I'm looking right now at the items to purchase. I can actually look at all of my items. So you'll see now when looking at all of my items, I have zeros here. And the reason you want to be able to do this is because let's say I knew something was happening here and I really should order 10, even though it's not calculating 10 for me right now, I can actually put in my purchase quantity of 10 in there to accommodate for that. So I can look at all my items. I can look at my items to purchase, which of course now includes that purchase quantity. And then I can look at items with no requirements by themselves as well. So these are all of my items that are not coming back with any requirements based on my purchase orders, my work tickets, my quantity on hand in inventory, my reorder points, etc. All of the information that it looks at. So those are the no requirements. If I go back here to my items to purchase, I can also filter. So these are the available options to filter. I can filter by item code, warehouse code. You see the whole list, anything I would really like to. So I'm going to filter by product line. So I'm going to click on the product line filter, which you'll notice doesn't do anything on the right-hand side. But then I can go ahead and click on any of these product lines to just see the product line information. So now I'm kind of dicing my data a little further. And you'll see as I continue to double click on these, I can see all of my items by product line if I wanted to do that. Those filters show up at the top, so I can just X out of that filter if I don't want to be filtered any longer. Additionally, up at the top, so we can go to rows. You know, if you have a lot of items that you are planning for, you could have more than this page. You know, I realize this is demo data. So you could say, take me to row 25 and it'll take you down there. We can delete lines from here. So similar to putting them on hold, it deletes them for this generation, essentially. We can also regenerate. So if I deleted something from here, or if I knew somebody added something into Sage, I knew they put in, you know, we just put in a big sales order and it wasn't in my generation, I can actually click the regenerate to have it look at that again. We have quantity inquiries here. So this is just an item quantity inquiry. If I want to double check something in inventory and see if the calculations look appropriate to me, we can do that. And of course, we can go to item maintenance, we can go to item inquiry, or just item status. Also up here, we can move to production. So let's say there's something we typically buy, but on occasion we may make it if we're in a bind. Or the other way around, when we look at the production side, you can do this as well. If it's something that we typically make, but we don't have time to make it right now, so we're going to buy it from a vendor, we can actually move it to the buys. So you can move them back either way if you would like to. And then there's a detail button, which is your final button. So I kind of really like this detail button. So if I'm on, let's say I'm on this capacitors thing and I click on the detail button, it's going to tell me exactly where this demand is coming from. So there's my sales order, there's my purchase order. This one may not be a very good example, but let's look at the one that said we should make 22 and see what that looks like. So here it's going to tell us we need 25 for sales order 34, we need 22 for sales order 37, but we have 21 coming in on this purchase order number. So you can see all the details of the information and how it's calculating it. So you can kind of double check the calculation, or if something doesn't look right to you, you can investigate it further, of course. So from here, I have some items on hold, you'll see, so it won't create purchase orders for all of these. But from here, I can go ahead and create my POs. So that's the final thing I'll show you on the PO side. I can go ahead and say create POs at the bottom, and it's going to say, what do we want to do? So do we want to create a new purchase order for each vendor? So remember, we know our primary vendors, they're listed there. That's how it's going to create the purchase orders, and it will combine these vendors. So all of the concept vendors are going to be on the same PO. We can create it to new. We can add to new. So if the vendor would have to have a purchase order in a status of new, which means that the status of new in Sage 100 means the purchase order hasn't been printed yet. We could say add to new, and it would add it to an existing purchase order that was in a status of new. We could say add to hold, so that would assume that we had a purchase order for the vendor and it was in a hold status and we wanted to add to that. So those are our options. I'm going to create new, and then it's going to run through this process of creating these purchase orders. You'll see every now and then it'll flash up on the screen. And then when it gets all the way through, it'll tell us how many purchase order lines it generated. So this one generated 23 purchase order lines. And you'll notice that now my hold items are what's left on my screen now for my IRP. So I'm just going to close the purchase side because I think we're done with that for now. But let's go ahead and look at purchase order and take a look at those. So I'm going to go into purchase order, and we'll go into purchase order entry. And we're going to look up those purchase orders that should be created with today's date. So let me pull my screen over here. And here's my purchase orders. And so you'll notice if I sort by date that I have all of these purchase orders created with today's date by vendor. And then you'll see that there could be potentially multiple items on a purchase order. So I can then look through, and I can do this, of course, with any from here, sorry, I can modify this just like any old purchase order. So it's just like any normal purchase order at this point. And I can continue to look through and see all the information for each of those. So that's the purchase order side of it. Pretty simple, right? Of course, if you realize that you didn't need that purchase order or you wanted to add it to an existing purchase order at that point, you could delete that purchase order and add the lines manually to the purchase order you want to. You could delete that purchase order, regenerate the PO side of things for IRP and recreate the POs. So you're not tied in once you create these. You can still manage that data and work with it if you have any issues with it. So now let's go back to the inventory requirements planning screen. That doesn't close because it gives you the option to go back to your production side of things. So if you're using production management and you have IRP installed with it, it's going to look at the production side of things as long as you have production management checked in your setup. And then you'll see this is the same screen we work at on the purchase side. So it's doing the same calculations, telling you what it needs to calculate or what it needs to purchase or produce, sorry, and why. So if I scroll over here, you can see all the reorder methods, you know, what quantity is available, what quantity are work tickets. So we can see all of the information as to how it comes up with what it would like us to make over here or produce. So here's our production quantity. So we can change those quantities. If we know we need to make a few more of one thing or another, we can change those quantities. We can also do the same things over here, whereas we can look at all of our items. So here we'll see these items don't have any requirement. So if we know something, we could put in a number here to get a requirement for that and have it generate work tickets for that. We can look at no requirements on its own as well if we wanted to. Also, when we go here, we can filter by product line again. So we could go ahead and see each item by product line and look at things that way. We can also, I didn't mention it on the purchase side, but we can create work tickets right from here, and it's looking just at this screen at this point. So it'll create those appropriate work tickets with a production quantity defined. If I did it here with my system, there's no production, my system product line, there's no production quantity defined, so it wouldn't create any work tickets on this. But if I go over here and look, there's some quantity needed for these, it would create work ticket just for those quantity needed. I can put things on hold again, just like we talked about before. So I'm going to go back to looking at just my items to produce. And then I can also quickly put them all on hold with the checkbox up here. I can do the same things we saw on the purchase side. I can delete a row. I can regenerate this production. I can look at item status, item maintenance, or item inquiry. I can move this to purchases. So I want to purchase it this time, so I'm going to move it over. And then I can click my detail as well. So as we discussed a little bit on the other side, this does not go back and change your data in Sage 100, let's say. So if I go ahead and I say I'm going to delete this row from here, nothing is deleted within Sage 100. It's just in this generation of everything where it's deleted. So this is kind of like a little working tool all in its own. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. So I'm just going to have it generate a couple work tickets for us just to show you. So down in the bottom right, I can say create work tickets. And remember that there's that detail button too, where you can see the detail of all the work tickets. I'll show you that in a second. So this one's going to tell me that 3 work tickets were generated. So we'll look at those in a second. So now I just have these left, and I can still go to this detail button and I can see what it's needed for. So I have a work ticket out there for 25. I have all these sales orders that are creating on demand as well, and it'll show you the balance calculations as you go too. So now I can go look at my work tickets that were created. So if I go to my production management, go into my work ticket entry, we can go ahead and look at those work tickets that we just created. So you'll see here's one of the ones from 4.6 just created. It's created for inventory. Here's the steps, materials, and all of that and so forth. So that's how it works. It's a really cool tool because it doesn't take a lot of setup. It just requires some reviewing of your information on the outset to make it easier to use. But it essentially is, you know, kind of like a plug and play option as far as inventory requirements planning. So I'll turn it back to Jolene for any questions, and we can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Monica. We'll now open it up for questions. If you have any questions, please enter them into the questions section of your GoToWebinar. And just a reminder, everyone, we do have a subject matter expert here. This is a great opportunity to have your questions answered in real time. And it does look like we've had one come through during the presentation, Monica.
Okay.
And it is, can you add additional information - line comments, one part number with optional color?
Oh, understand what you mean. Like, right, I see what you're saying. No, not within IRP itself. You can't add any common information. You would then have to go into the purchase order after and add that common information.
And we have another that's come in. Is IRP offered on all versions of Sage 100?
It is not. And I want to say that it was available in 2020, but possibly 2019. So I'll double check that. Jolene, I don't know how we can communicate that once I do, but.
Yeah, we can follow up with that specific person.
Okay.
And we
Okay.
have another that's come through. Are there any reports that go with the IRP module?
There are not.
Okay.
Nope. No, I think you could potentially write a custom report off of the table when it's generated. Those are actual tables that are generating that data. So you potentially could write a custom report off of that if you wanted to, but there's none that come with it.
And someone responded, it was released in 2019 PU1, for the person
Thank
who's
you.
wondering.
Thanks for looking that up for me.
Perfect. And I believe that's all the questions, so just give me 1 second as I take back screen control.
Sure.
Oh, actually, there's one more that just came in. Can IRP parameters, e.g. MOQ, LT, loaded into Sage by batch using Excel instead of maintained manually one by one?
Oh, I don't believe we can. I'm going to have to check that. I don't believe it can be imported into, but I'll check.
Okay, so we'll follow up with you as well.
Yep.
Perfect. So give me 1 second as I take back screen control. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Monica, for your informative presentation and for taking the time to be here today. And thank you everyone for attending our webinar. Have a wonderful rest of your day.